You wake before the sun does, and before your stomach remembers it's empty. But soon enough, it does remember, and it growls like a dog tied too long to a post. The fire in your belly wants food, but the fire in your hearth, well, there is no hearth. Not really. There's no neat little kitchen tucked away in its own cozy room. There's no stove humming gently like some warm, obedient beast. You have the ground beneath your feet, cold and damp from last night's mist. You have a smoky fire pit outside your crooked little house, stones arranged in a rough circle like some lopsided crown. You have the wind sneaking down your collar, laughing softly at your attempts to stay warm. And somewhere deep in your calloused hands, you have the knowledge passed down from grandmothers and great-aunts of how to make a meal out of practically nothing. You step outside. The air smells of wet earth and burning wood. Smoke drifts lazily from your neighbor's fire, where someone else has already beaten you to the morning meal. You can almost hear the crackle of fat and the hiss of water spitting into hot coals. You hope they'll share, but you know they probably won't. Food isn't easy to come by in your little patch of the world. Not in this century, where time drips by like cold porridge, and every meal is a small miracle. You don't have a kitchen because you don't have the luxury of a room built just for cooking. You have a corner of your hut where you might keep a clay pot or a cracked wooden bowl. You have an outdoor fire pit that doubles as a source of heat, light, and occasional danger when the wind whips sparks into your dry thatch roof. You crouch by the fire, your knees crackling almost as loudly as the kindling. You blow on the embers, gently coaxing them awake. They glow like sleepy eyes, reluctant but willing. You add twigs, dried grass, maybe a scrap of peat if you're lucky enough to have scavenged one yesterday. Slowly the flames catch, licking at the air, warming your face, making your eyes sting in water. Your ingredients today are humble, as always. A scrap of bread hardened overnight into something resembling a roof tile. A handful of wild greens you yanked from beside the road. Maybe if fortune has smiled, the last of the dried peas, tucked into the corner of your lardera. Larder, of course, being a grand word for the damp wooden shelf that shares space with your winter boots and a sleeping cat. There is no recipe book perched on a shelf, no shiny copper pans hanging in artistic arrangement. What you have is instinct, habit, and a kind of weary creativity. You know from years of watching your mother and your grandmother before her that cooking is less about instructions and more about listening. Listen to the sizzle when the pan is hot enough. Listen to the bubbling of a pot that's almost boiling over. Listen to your stomach, grumbling with impatience. You hang your battered little pot over the flames, balancing it carefully on an iron tripod. A splash of water from the bucket by the door, cloudy and slightly gritty but drinkable enough. You toss in the peas, brittle and dry, hoping the heat will coax them back to life. You hum softly, partly to pass the time, partly because someone told you once that food cooks better when you sing to it. As the steam rises, you toss in your greens, stirring them with a stick that serves as both spoon and fire poker. The leaves wilt quickly, shrinking down into a dark, tangled mess that smells, well, better than nothing. A neighbor wanders past, yawning and scratching at his beard. He sniffs the air, and for a moment, you see the flicker of jealousy in his eyes. You smile, but you don't invite him to join you. Not today. Maybe tomorrow. You crumble your stale bread into the pot, watching it soften and thicken the broth. This is your breakfast, your lunch, and maybe your supper, if the gods are feeling stingy today. It's not much, but it's hot, and hot food fills a body in ways that cold, hard bread never can. And there you sit, wrapped in your patched-up cloak, watching the sun finally drag itself over the horizon like a reluctant worker. The fields beyond your hut glow softly in the morning light. The smoke from your fire curls upward, joining the many other thin gray threads rising from your neighbors' homes. Together, they weave a kind of invisible tapestry above your village. A silent, fragrant testimony to the fact that people are alive and hungry and cooking without kitchens. You ladle the hot, steaming mess into a cracked bowl and cradle it in your hands like a fragile treasure. You blow on it, sending little ripples across its surface. For a moment you pause, soaking in the quiet, the heat, the comfort of something warm against your belly. It's not glamorous. It's no roasted boars, no golden pies cooling on windowsills. But it's yours. Yours in the way that survival is always yours, earned daily through smoke and sweat and the careful tending of small fires. And tomorrow, if the wind blows kindly and the rain holds off, you'll do it again. Later in the day, your stomach begins to whisper again. Breakfast was warm, but fleeting. And the work of surviving wears the calories away faster than you can count them, though truthfully, you never did learn to count much beyond the number of fingers on your hands. You rise from your little wooden stool, stretch your aching back, and peer out over the village. The breeze carries the smell of other fires, other stews, other desperate culinary attempts. Someone down the lane is boiling onions, and your mouth waters despite yourself. But onions cost a penny at market, and pennies aren't exactly sprouting in your garden rows. So you tie your cloak against the wind and set off to gather what the land and perhaps your neighbors will spare. In the Middle Ages, no one really owns the fields, though they might argue otherwise with fists or sharp words. The woods beyond the edge of the village are fair game. If you know where to look and how to run fast if someone catches you picking their mushrooms. You walk along the muddy path, your boots squelching softly. Your eyes scan the hedgerows like a hawk, searching for mice. Ah, there's some nettles, bright and sharp, clustered beside a fallen log. You pluck them carefully, folding the stems under so they don't sting your palms. These will wilt nicely over the fire, lose their bite, and give your soup a little green life. Next, you kneel by the stream, where wild watercress grows thick and peppery. A few handfuls of the leaves make their way into your basket. They'll add a bitter bite to whatever thin broth you cobble together tonight. If luck holds, maybe you'll find a patch of wild garlic, its scent giving it away long before you spot the slender white flowers. You dig a little, ignoring the mud creeping under your nails. You'll wash them in the stream later, or perhaps not at all. Dirt is a seasoning of its own in this world. On your way back, you pass the home of the baker's widow. Her cooking fire sends out soft, toasty smells that make your stomach groan in betrayal. You consider stopping to chat. Maybe she'd part with a heel of bread gone to stale for her liking. Or maybe she'll send you away with a thin smile and a reminder that last week you borrowed without asking. But boldness sometimes cooks a better meal than timidity. You call out a greeting. She eyes you through the smoke, weighing the worth of your empty hands. Got anything to trade then?
Thanks.
She asks, wiping her hands on her apron. You dig deep into your pocket and pull out a shiny pebble, smooth and polished by the river. It's worthless, of course, but you spin a tale about how it keeps spirits away from the hearth. She chuckles mostly at your foolishness, but tosses you a small lump of coarse salt and a turnip beginning to sprout tiny green shoots. It's a fair trade. Back home, you dump your findings onto the rough wooden table, really just a plank balanced across two crates. The nettles, the watercress, the garlic, the lonely turnip, and a precious pinch of salt.
Ice.
It doesn't look like much, but it will taste like more when the fire works its slow, quiet magic. You build your fire again, coaxing life into the ashes. The wind teases the smoke this way and that, making your eyes sting in water. You wipe them dry with a frayed sleeve and lower your pot over the flames once more. In goes the turnip, roughly chopped with your small, dull knife. The greens follow, along with the wild garlic, filling the air with sharp, mouth-watering scent. You add water, and then a few pebbles for luck. Not that pebbles add flavor, but your grandmother swore they made the soup heartier, and who are you to argue with centuries of superstition? The pot bubbles and sighs, as though it, too, is tired from the day's work. You sit back, warming your hands against the fire, watching the steam rise in slow, lazy curls. Somewhere nearby, children's laughter drifts over the fields, mingling with the caws of distant crows. A dog barks, chasing nothing in particular. Life goes on, in its simple, scraping way. You wonder, briefly, what it would be like to have a kitchen like the Lord's manor great stone walls. It's an actual oven, servants to stir the pot while you rest your feet. But you shake your head and chuckle softly. That's not your world. Your world is nettles, muddy boots, and an outdoor fire that smokes more often than it roars. And somehow, that's enough. When the soup is ready, you ladle it into your one good bowl, the crack sealed with wax from last winter's bees. You sit cross-legged by the fire, letting the heat wash over your tired bones. The first sip is sharp and green, the second, softer, warmer. Hunger does most of the seasoning. As the sun dips lower in the sky, you watch the other fires spring up around the village. One by one, each cook performing their own little miracle of survival. No kitchens, no recipes, no shiny tools. Just hands, fire, and whatever the day could offer. You smile. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. But of course, not every day cooperates. Today, the rain comes early, long before your fire has finished its morning yawn. It creeps in through the thatch, drips from the eaves, soaks the woodpile you so carefully stacked last week. You step outside and the world greets you not with sun, but with dripping branches and a soggy sky. And fire is a fickle thing. You crouch by the damp ashes, blowing, coaxing, pleading, but your kindling hisses in protest. Wet wood smokes and sulks, smolders but does not burn. The rain laughs as it slides down your nose, soaking your sleeves, dampening your spirits. Cooking without a kitchen is not simply rustic and charming. It's wet fingers and shivering shoulders and stubborn embers refusing to catch. Eventually your neighbor wanders by, his own cloak plastered to his back, holding a single glowing coal between two sticks, like it's the world's last treasure. He offers you a tired grin and the coal wordlessly. No one survives alone in this world. With trembling hands, you nestle the ember into your pile of damp twigs. You blow gently at first, then harder, cheeks puffing, eyes smarting. Slowly, painfully, the twigs begin to smolder, the smoke burning your throat before the flame can warm your skin. At last it catches. Not much of a fire, thin and coughing like an old man's laugh, but it will do. You shield it with your body, crouched low, a human wall against the wind. Bits of last year's straw, broken sticks from the hedgerow, anything that will burn this is your kitchen today. And when the fire finally breathes steady and strong, you fetch your little iron pot once more. Today's ingredients are even humbler than yesterday's. The turnip is gone. The nettles are soggy from the rain. But you found a few barley grains at the bottom of your sack, stubborn and dusty, but still willing to cook. You rinse them in cold water, your fingers numb and red. The grains slip through your grasp like tiny stones. Into the pot they go, along with a splash of water from the rain barrel cleanish. You hope in the few wilted greens you manage to dry on a cloth inside your hut. It's not much. It's never much. But the pot begins to bubble, steam rising into the cold air, mingling with your breath. And for a little while, the world feels less empty. You sit beside the fire, cloak wrapped tight, steam warming your face. The rain patters on the earth, steady as a heartbeat. There is no shelter here except your own patience. Some days you wonder why kitchens weren't built for people like you. The big manor houses have them stone-walled rooms with ovens tall as a man and smoke flues carved into the ceiling. Fires that burn all night, tended by servants who aren't afraid of getting wet. But here in your world, the kitchen is wherever you can keep a fire alive. Under a tree, in the shadow of your hut, beside a fallen log where the wind doesn't bite quite so hard. And the tools, oh, those are simple things. A blackened pot with a chipped rim, a bent iron hook to hang it from, a single sharp knife that serves for cutting, prying, mending, and sometimes when luck runs out. Defending your supper from hungry dogs, the recipe, whatever you found that morning. Some days it's barley and greens. Other days it's boiled weeds with salt if you have salt. If not, you chew and swallow and pretend it tastes better than it does. But despite the rain and the cold and the endless repetition, there's a quiet kind of pride in making something from nothing. You stir the pot slowly, watching the barley soften and swell. You hum again, your voice lost in the wind. Maybe a bird joins in, or maybe it's just your imagination. Either way, the soup bubbles on. Eventually, the hunger inside you hushes. You lift the pot from the fire, balancing it on your knees as you blow across the steaming surface. First taste, warm, grainy, a little bitter, alive like you. You smile, because in a world where survival is never promised, you've done it again, fed yourself with nothing but smoke, soaked wood, and stubbornness. As the rain slows and the sky lightens, just a little, you know that tomorrow might bring sunshine or worse rain, but you'll face it the same way, with your pot, with your fire, and with whatever you can scavenge, beg, or borrow from the wild earth and the weary people around you. Sometimes rarely you get meat, not the grand kind of meat, not the golden roasted swans spinning on spits in castle kitchens, their feathers saved for fancy hats. No, your meat is a little more humble. A rabbit if your snare was kind, a small bird if your stone flew straight. A salted herring, if the traveling fish seller happened to pass through your village and you scraped together enough coins or trade. But today it is a scrawny rabbit, thin and wiry, all legs and bones and barely enough flesh to stretch across 2 meals. You thank the woods and the snares, and perhaps your half-remembered prayers. You do not have a kitchen counter to prepare your catch. No marble slabs, no brass hooks, no clean knives glinting in the light. You squat on the ground, skinning the rabbit with the same knife you used yesterday to cut kindling and scrape mud from your boots. The work is messy, hands slippery, the fur stubbornly clinging to the skin. But you've done this before, many times. You hum a tune your grandmother taught you, a slow, steady rhythm to keep your hands moving. Yet, when the rabbit is clean, you glance around for your roasting tool. There's no iron spit, no grand rotisserie. Instead, you find a forked stick still damp from the morning rain. You whittle it sharp and clean, wipe it on your cloak, and pierce the rabbit through. You build your fire again, feeding it with dry twigs and broken fence posts. The flames crackle to life, golden and sharp. Hold the rabbit over the heat, slowly turning, watching fat drip into the fire and hiss like angry whispers. The smell rises, rich and wild, filling the empty space where your kitchen ought to be. A neighbor smells it too. Of course, his shadow falls across your fire. "Trade you some dried apples for a bite," he says, pretending he hasn't been standing there for the last 10 minutes. And you, because sharing food is one of the few ways people stay human in this life, you nod, slicing off a small piece and passing it over. He leaves a handful of shriveled apples by your side and wanders off, chewing and smiling. Your meal is not yet done. Rabbit alone would leave your belly grumbling by nightfall. You dig out the remaining barley and toss a handful into your pot with a splash of water and a pinch of salt. You pluck a few wild herbs from your pouch sorrel. Thyme, maybe a bitter little weed you hope won't kill you, and add them to the mix. The pot bubbles beside the fire while the rabbit finishes roasting above it. Ow! Slowly the sun drifts lower, turning the smoke golden and soft. You sit beside your fire, cloak wrapped tight, stomach rumbling gently in anticipation. In the distance, someone pounds dough for tomorrow's bread. A child cries. Rooster crows too late for the morning, but too early for supper. Life hums on around you. When the rabbit is done, you tear the meat from the bone, adding some to your stew, keeping a little aside for tomorrow, when hunting may bring nothing but tired feet and empty traps. You ladle the hot stew into your bowl, feeling its warmth seep into your fingers. The first bite is rich and smoky. The second is softer, rounded by the barley and herbs. You chew slowly, not because you're savoring, but because you're stretching this moment out. It's letting the fullness linger just a little longer before the hunger returns tomorrow. There are no kitchens here, but there are fires, and hands that know how to cook when there's almost nothing left to cook with. And that for now is enough. As dusk falls, you tuck the remaining rabbit meat into a cloth, hang your pot over the cooling coals to dry, and sit in the fading light, belly warm and head heavy. Tomorrow, you'll set your snares again. Tomorrow, the fire might struggle, or the rains might wash your plans away. But tonight, you cooked meat on a stick, and for a little while, you feel almost rich. There are days when you cook not just for yourself, days when mouths multiply like mice in a granary. A neighbor has broken his leg, or someone's wife has given birth, and the household is too busy swaddling the screaming child to bother with stew. Or it is simply the feast day of a saint whose name you've long forgotten, but whose excuse for a gathering you gladly remember. And on these days your little pot will not do. You wander the muddy paths, knocking on low doors, asking, "May I borrow your biggest pan?" Some laugh and hand over a battered cauldron big enough to bathe in. Others grumble but lend you a warped iron skillet, its handle blackened from years of open flames and careless hands. Soon you have a pile of borrowed pans, each with its own story. The dent from the night it fell into the well, the cracks sealed with solder, the soot that never quite scrubs clean. You build your fire bigger than usual, stacking stones to hold your grand mismatched cookware. The flames lick high, casting long shadows as the sun begins to dip. You call out to the children, sending them running into the fields and hedgerows to gather anything edible. Wild onions, tender dandelion greens, fat snails if they're brave enough. One by one, the village women trickle over with handfuls of whatever they can spare. A knuckle of smoked bacon, a wedge of hard cheese, a palmful of dried beans. It's a strange thing on most days. You all guard your food like precious jewels. But when the pots grow big enough and the fires burn hot enough, generosity softens your hunger just a little. Stir the bubbling cauldron with a stick as long as your arm, sweat beading on your brow. The smell rises into the evening air, rich, savory, alive. People gather, as they always do when food calls. They bring their own cracked bowls and mismatched spoons. No matching plates here, no linen napkins. No, just what they have and what they've brought. Stew bubbles and pops, thick with whatever the day could spare. Barley softens, beans split open. Bacon melts its smoky heart into the broth. And you stand there, the unlikely cook stirring the evening's salvation. You ladle out portions, handing them over with a nod and a tired smile. To the widow who traded you salt last week, to the shepherd boy who shares his firewood on cold nights, to the baker's apprentice who once slipped you an extra heel of bread when no one was looking. And yes, you save a bowl for yourself. Last, but no less grateful. The meal is simple, but it fills the hollow place in your belly and, perhaps the one in your heart too. Laughter rises, mingling with the smoke. Someone starts a song off-key, but heartfelt. Children chase one another around the fire. For this one evening, no one eats alone. You watch the fire crackle, throwing sparks into the darkening sky. You know the pots must be scrubbed tomorrow, the fire pit cleaned, the pans returned to their rightful owners, though some will forget and others won't mind. But tonight, it feels like enough. No kitchen, no walls to keep the wind out, just borrowed pans, borrowed food, and borrowed joy. And when the last bowl is scraped clean and the last story is told, you sit beside the embers and sigh, full in a way that food alone cannot explain. But tomorrow, you'll cook again. Maybe alone. Maybe for the whole village once more. But for now, the fire fades, and the world feels just a little warmer. Your kitchen tools are not shiny or new. They're worn, patched, repaired again and again. Take your pot, for instance, Clay, roughly fired, with a chip on one side that leaks a little if you fill it too high. You remember when it was made, years ago, shaped by a potter whose hands smelled of earth and ash? You traded a sack of onions and a promise to weed his garden for it, fair deal, and your spoon? You carved that yourself from a branch that fell in last autumn's storm. It's lopsided, cracked along the edge, but it stirs soup just fine. Your knife, the most precious of them all, is little more than a bit of iron, with a handle wrapped in worn leather. You sharpen it on a river stone when you have time, though these days you rarely do. No kitchen drawer holds these tools. No rack displays them neatly on a wall. They hang from pegs on your hut's beam or sit in a basket by the fire where smoke darkens them further every day. There's a kind of pride in knowing you could replace them yourself should they break. Or at least try to. You don't have pans with polished copper bottoms, but you have a flat stone that heats nicely over coals, perfect for warming yesterday's bread or crisping a bit of cheese. And you don't have an oven with a crackling hearth, but you know how to dig a pit, line it with stones, and bury your food beneath hot embers to roast slowly, hidden from the wind. The world itself is your kitchen, if you're willing to fight for it. You remember the iron hook your uncle gave you, the one you hang your pot from? It swings gently above the fire, creaking slightly with each gust of wind. He forged it himself, heating metal until it glowed like the sun, hammering it into shape as sparks flew into the night. No one in the village has another hook quite like it, and that makes it yours. You don't think much about these things most days. Tools are tools. You pick them up, you use them, you put them down. But sometimes, when the fire burns low and your belly is full enough to let your mind wander, you pause. You run your fingers over the spoon's worn handle, feel the grooves left by your own carving knife. You tip your pot sideways, letting the last drops of stew fall into your bowl. And you hear the faint whistle of steam slipping through the crack that's been patched again, and still holds together. In these small things, you see your life. Rough, imperfect, but useful. And isn't that what matters most? So you stir your soup once more, scrape the last bit of barley from the bottom of the pot, and set your tools aside for the night. Tomorrow, you'll take them up again. Because the fire needs tending, the water needs boiling, The belly needs filling, and there is no one else who will do it for you. But some days, some days the cupboards are bare. The traps are empty, and the fields give you nothing but weeds too bitter to eat. On these days, you go to the market. Not because you have coins in your pocket, but because hope walks faster than hunger. The market is not far. It's just a short walk through muddy lanes, past leaning fences and curious chickens, where merchants shout from beneath patchwork awnings. But you, with your empty purse and tired boots, are not a prized customer. You are the one who hovers near the end of the stalls, eyes darting between the bruised turnips and the wilted onions, waiting for the moment when sellers pack up their goods and toss what they cannot sell to the ground. You are not the only one. Children, old women, and tired men with patched sleeves wait beside you, pretending not to notice each other. When the moment comes, it is quiet. A nod from the cabbage seller, a gesture from the fishmonger. And then you move, all of you, gathering what scraps you can, a half-rotted apple, a lump of cheese gone hard at the edges, a handful of cracked beans no one else would bother with. This is your treasure. You cradle it in your arms as though it were silver. Sometimes, if luck or charm is with you, a merchant will take pity. He might hand you a shriveled carrot or a stale loaf, saying, "Take it before the rats do." And you will smile, thank him, and walk away before he changes his mind. There are no kitchens in this market square, but there are pots slung over open fires, where travelers stew onions in cheap wine, and laborers boil eels caught from the muddy streams. You watch them, inhaling the steam, letting your stomach dream of meals richer than yours. Then you return home, past hedges heavy with thorns, past neighbors repairing their leaky roofs, past dogs sleeping in the dust. You dump your market findings onto the table. A small, sorry pile, but enough for something. You peel away the soft spots on the apple, cut the cheese into smaller pieces where the mold hasn't won. The beans will take hours to cook, but what else do you have besides time?
Yeah.
You build your fire once more, blowing life into it like a bellows. The pot clangs against the iron hook. Water fills it. Beans drop in with a splash. You hum softly to yourself, the only audience your cracked spoon and your empty belly. Hours pass, slow as winter mud. But finally the smell rises, faint but comforting. Beans and cheese. Apple and smoke. A strange meal, but a meal all the same. You eat slowly, carefully, chewing as though you were at a feast, not crouched beside a smoky fire outside your hut. When your bowl is empty, you sit a while longer, letting your stomach stretch and sigh. And though you will return to the market again, and again, and again, each time hoping, each time scraping together enough to last the day-to-day you cooked, without a kitchen, without much of anything, except fire and patience, and the quiet, stubborn will to carry on. But not every day is lean and lonely. There are feast days rare, but they come, like patches of sunlight breaking through gray clouds. Saints' days, harvest festivals, weddings, or simply the first day of spring, when the fields no longer feel like graveyards. On these days, the fires grow larger, the pots are scrubbed clean. Even the grumpiest neighbor smiles, just a little. You join the others in the village square, where there are no kitchens, but plenty of fires, stacked high and hot. People bring what they can. A wheel of cheese saved for months. A side of pork salted last winter, apples and berries gathered by sticky fingers in the woods. Someone's cousin has returned from town with strange spices pepper. Maybe, or cinnamon, and the whole village smells like a place far richer than it really is. There are no recipes written down, but everyone knows what to do. Pies stuffed with minced meat and dried fruits are wrapped in thick, rough pastry and baked in makeshift ovens of brick and earth. Skewers of fish and fowl, basted with honey, roast slowly over open flames, dripping juices into the fire below. Flatbreads bubble on hot stones, soups boil thick and rich, filling the air with their hearty steam. Children run wild, stealing scraps when they think no one's looking. Dogs do the same, less discreet. You laugh. Because today, no one guards their food too closely. You eat until your belly is round and your legs are lazy. For once, no one is counting what's left. You sit beside a fire, wiping grease from your chin with the back of your sleeve, listening to a fiddler scratch out a tune older than memory. The stars blink awake overhead, and still the fires burn, and still the laughter carries across the fields. Tonight, no one minds that there is no kitchen. The whole world is a kitchen. The ground is the floor, the sky is the roof, and the fire is enough. Tomorrow, you will go back to your small pot, your lopsided spoon, your scraps of nettles and barley. Tomorrow, the hunger will creep back, familiar as the morning mist, but not tonight. Tonight you eat with your hands, drink with your neighbors, and smile at the smoke curling into the night sky. For just this once, food is not survival, it is joy. For a fleeting moment, your tired little village feels like the grandest hall in the world. But feast days fade, and soon enough, winter creeps in with its sharp, icy breath. And when the snow comes down, blanketing your fire pit and freezing your fingers stiff, cooking outside becomes less a daily task and more a battle against the cold. Also, you drag your fire inside. Not into a kitchen because, again, you don't have one, but into the one room where you sleep, eat, mend your socks, and dream your tired dreams. The fire sits low in a shallow pit dug right into the packed earth floor. You try your best to keep the smoke from filling the room, propping open the door, cracking a shutter. But some days the smoke wins. You cough and squint through the haze, waving it away with your sleeve as your stew simmers in the gloom. It's not safe, really. A stray ember could eat your house alive while you sleep. But what choice do you have? Freeze outside or choke on smoke indoors? Winter food is different. It's heavier, saltier, longer lasting. You boil beans and dried peas until they fall apart in the pot, adding the last scraps of last summer's herbs. Maybe you have a slab of salted pork hung from a beam all these cold months. You shave thin slices into the stew, listening to the fat hiss as it meets the hot broth. Some days you bake flatbread by slapping wet dough onto the side of your fire pit, turning it until it's golden and chewy. Other days, you make porridge thick, dull filling. It sticks to your ribs and your spoon. No fresh greens, no wild berries, just what you manage to store, or what your neighbors are kind enough to share. And yet somehow, this is when cooking feels the most alive. Maybe because the fire warms not just the food, but your frozen toes. Maybe because every hot bite reminds you that spring will come back one day, slow though it may be. You sit by your smoky little hearth, wrapped in every scrap of wool and linen you own, blowing on your bowl to cool it down even as your breath fogs in the air. The cat curls beside you, more smoke than fur. The wind howls outside, shaking your walls like an old friend with bad news. But inside for now, the fire burns. You eat your meal slowly, because you know tomorrow it may be thinner, smaller, colder. And when the bowl is empty and the fire burns low, you crawl into your straw bed, the smell of smoke and onions clinging to your hair. No kitchens, no cookbooks. Just you, a tired fire, and a meal that somehow keeps you going. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because winter is long, but you are stubborn. And your little fire, against all odds, refuses to go out. And so your days roll on, slow and smoky, wrapped in hunger and heat. The fire is your kitchen, your companion, your chore. You do not wake up thinking, "What shall I cook today?" You wake up thinking, "Will the fire light? Will the beans soften before nightfall? Will the wind steal my flame again?" There are no shiny countertops, no gleaming ovens humming softly in the background, just earth beneath your feet, wood and smoke in your lungs, and the crackle of flames fighting the chill of morning. You learn, over the years, to read your food not by recipes, but by sight, by smell, by sound. You know when the barley is ready, by the quiet bubbling of the pot. You know the difference between a fire that will warm your stew and a fire that will burn it to ash. And you know perhaps more deeply than anyone in a fine kitchen ever will that cooking is not about perfect dishes or flawless timing. It is about survival, about warmth, about stubbornness, and sometimes about sharing what little you have with someone hungrier than you. There will be more feast days, more lean days, more mornings when your pot is empty and your stomach growls before the birds begin to sing. But each time you'll light your fire. Gather what you can, and make something anything that fills your belly and reminds you, you are still here, you, without a kitchen. You with your cracked bowl, your handmade spoon, your patchwork cloak. Still cooking. Still living. Still tending the fragile little flame that keeps you fed and warm and human. And when you blow on the coals one last time at the end of the day, watching the smoke drift up into the dark sky, you smile. Because tomorrow, the world will ask you to start all over again. You will.